we all are into the field of higher education, so we are conversant with the research process. And I'm not going to dwell into this flow chart, but I have simplified this flow chart in terms of topic generation to reporting as the different phases of the research process into the next slide. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. Now, the authors Vershon and Doreward, they have spelled out when we pay attention to research, we need to pay attention to these aspects right from design. So they're referring to two significant phases, namely conceptual design and technical design. And in terms of conceptual design, they indicate that researchers need to pay attention to problem definition, research questions, research objectives, conceptual model, and operational definition or operationalization. So this is more into the theoretical world. Now, when we're talking about the technical design, they say that we need to pay attention to the research design and reporting. So the way I'm structuring my presentation is that if we pay attention to these aspects of research, we will be able to get meaningful data or vital information that is publication worthy. Because as we read in that quote, one of the reasons we are not able to have things published in good journals is because our data or the matter that we are having is not publication worthy. So how can we pay attention to that? That is the scope of the next why I'm presenting this definition, it's not out of place. It is only to say that when we want to have good publications, we need to have meaningful research. And meaningful research draws from this simple definition of research, which says that it should answer questions. That means your research questions, or when we are conceptualizing fresh studies, our research questions should be right. Similarly, it also says that it has to be systematic. So when our work is systematic, that means there is rigor in our work, we will be able to come up with noteworthy publications. Then the third aspect of the definition was it should be with the support of demonstrable fact. That means it is based on literature. Most often when we review papers, we find that the literature review, the identification of research gap and the research study, the current research study, that linkage is not very evident. There is a compilation called literature review, but it does not help us to derive the research gap. Similarly, from the research gap, the current research is not positioned. So that is the reason why I'm saying when we want to come up with meaningful research, we have to spell out the right research questions that are pertinent, that are original, that are noteworthy. Similarly, our work should be based on systematic work. It's just not pure convenience that comes into play, but systematic work. And definitely it should be with the support of demonstrable fact. That means literature support. So we need to keep these things in mind when we are coming up with research activity. Next slide, please. So I will draw from the flow chart given in the slide before, and then we will go into each step and we will understand what are the pointers we have to keep in mind so that we can focus on our research. Now, the first thing is regarding problem identification. As we all know, it refers to identifying the area of research. Now, when we are doing problem identification, I suggest, or even literature says that the do's are, that means how can we identify a problem? Going for something that is original. Similarly, something that is interesting, significant, and feasible. Feasibility is very important. We should not take something over ambitious and then struggle either in terms of data collection or even handling or getting the executing the research. Similarly, originality is very important. Now, in the current COVID situation, probably a lot of research in the field of COVID gains significance. So we need to plan our work so that it is original, it's interesting, significant, feasible. Sometimes it should also have a reasonable lifespan for the research study. When you're talking about don'ts, let us not take topics purely based on convenience, topics that lack depth, or topics that are often repeated. So we need to have a twist. Even say, for example, when we are talking about human resource management, we say there are studies on job satisfaction. But we all know that job satisfaction is a very old topic. But if we are still convinced that we want to study that, we should really have a twist in that topic, something original, so that it's worth reading. That is my message. Now, how can we do it as researchers? First, it comes through practice, that is reading. Then through academic discussions, that means deliberations with fellow scholars, attending significant conferences, so that we know what is a trending topic, we know the way forward, we know how people are thinking and discussing, how can we think differently and take it forward. Then we also need to keep track of the emerging trends in our own interests. And because we are having research scholars, I should also say sometimes it's based on your academic compulsions. Say if you're joining as a research scholar for a study that has received grants, then you will fit into that role. So that's also based on academic compulsions. But interest in one's research topic is definitely a must. So unless we pay attention at this phase of problem identification, the rest of the steps will not be automatic, right? Can I proceed? Is it okay for everybody? So once we decide on what we want to do, the next logical phase will be for literature review. Now, when we are doing literature review, we need to pay attention to the conceptual review and the empirical literature. Now, this is what I refer to as subject matter in the slide called key pillars. Now, conceptual review and empirical review, they are essential for us to understand, say for example, a simple thing called definition. It will go through a lot of series of changes over a period of time. Now, at different points of time, each concept would have evolved. So we need to be conversant with those milestones. So I'm still talking about the previous slide. So we need to be conversant of the milestones. Similarly, we also need to know what is the empirical literature in terms of data. Now, what is the source for this literature? It should be standard journals. Unfortunately, and increasingly, we have a lot of literature in the internet which claims to be international journal or global review, but most often they are predatory in nature. So we should draw our literature from standard journals. Only then it will have global standing, and then we will be able to pitch our work appropriately. So that's a caution for everybody. Now, there are resource constraints for institutions to get access to such literature, but there are via media also, probably visiting libraries. So we should get the literature from standard journals. That's the message. Now, when we do literature, we can go paper by paper or utilize existing literature review articles itself. I mentioned about systematic reviews. There are papers on meta-analytic reviews also. That means using literature review, doing data analysis. When we study such papers on our research topic, that will give us a lot of insight. Similarly, when we are doing literature review, we should focus on the classic works. That means the pillars or the pioneers. We definitely need to know them and then move on to understanding the recent trends. Now, as researchers or as researchers, we need to maintain a database of the articles reviewed. It can be a simple Excel sheet, keep track of what we are reading and keep the log of our readings. That means what are the insights, what are the highlights. If you just Google in the net, we can have sample literature review tables. So it talks about the source of the article, what is the focus, what are the variables they have measured, what is the theoretical underpinning, what is the methodology they have taken, and what is the finding. All this in just a table. And because we are working in Excel, it is much easier for us to edit, keep track of things. Now, once we have this raw material ready, we will be able to organize our literature in a much better way. Now, to my students, I would often say go in for thematic literature review, presentation of literature review, followed by chronological. So that means we should be able to organize our literature under reasonable or under meaningful subheadings, and also attend to it chronologically so that we can understand the flow. So we need to organize our literature. Next. The next is regarding problem definition. Okay, next is regarding problem definition. Before that, we need to talk about research gap. We have the next slide. Okay, when one of the major takeaways of literature review is just not understanding literature, but also identifying research gaps. Now, in my opening statement, I said the problem identification should be original. Similarly, that means what you want to do should be original. Now, how will we establish that originality is based on this literature review. So we need to identify the research gaps. That means areas that are not explored, that are yet to be explored. So we need to identify that, or these are also known as missing. Okay. And then now when we, how can we identify this research gap? This research gap we can call out from the discussion section of good papers, or similarly the scope for future research. One, by extensive reading. Apart from that, some of the shortcuts would be to keep track of the discussion page or the scope for future research. Now, once we finalize on the research gap, we will move on to the problem definition. Problem definition is nothing but scoping or demarcating our work. Now, this is very important, more from the feasibility point of view, and it helps us decide on the thrust areas of our research. Once we decide on the literature review, spell out the research gaps and the problem definition, we will move on to spelling out the research questions. Research questions are very important. Why? Because unless we seek to answer the right research questions, our research may not focus on what is important. Rather, it will be just any other research. So we need to answer these questions, identify these questions carefully and seek answers to them. Now, these research questions are also important because from the research questions, we will have the research objectives. From the research objectives, you will spell out your variables. From your variables, you will move on to spelling out your hypothesis. I'm talking more from the quantitative point of view. So your research questions is very, very essential from that point of view. Now, how do we develop these research questions? It can be developed from our review of literature and also the research gaps. Now, the next thing is to identify the research objectives, it should be in sync with your research questions, and it should be clearly spelled out. We need not have very verbose or very long, lengthy sentences, but if we can break down and say, this is the scope of my work, these are my objectives, I think that will speak volumes, and that is very, very important. Clarity is very important. Okay, once we decide on the research objectives, we have to pay attention to the conceptual model, or it's also known as conceptual framework, or identifying the key concept of your work, the variables, and the interrelations between them. Some of us, we use the term model. So we need to pay attention to this. So the choice of variable is very, very critical. We just can't throw terms into the research process. So we need to choose our variables correctly. Now, again, for this, our literature review will be useful. Next, we need to theorize our arguments or the logic for choosing certain variables. So all these things will be based on the researcher's intuition, expression, and logical reasoning. Now, this conceptual model process is very important because it helps us spell out the hypothesis in the subsequent stages. So once you decide on the problem identification, do the literature review, identify the gaps, decide on what you want to do, spell out your research questions, research objectives, then move on to identifying or spelling out the conceptual framework. That means, in other words, simply stated all the key variables and how do you expect these variables to. Once we do this, we will go on to the next stage of operationalization. This is very, very important because from the research point of view, from the researcher point of view, we are spelling out how we intend to measure certain variables. So this description is very, very important. And operationalization, say for example, the same concept may have various philosophies or various schools of thought or various theoretical underpinnings. So we need to take a call regarding which school of thought we will go by. So if we are going to go by a particular school of thought, then we need to operationalize our concepts from that school of thought. If we profess to do something but end up measuring from another point of view, then that's a contraindicator. So we need to pay attention to operationalization, and this in a way will determine our tool construction. Tool construction in terms of choice of variables, how we are going to frame your questions, how we are going to draft, how the variables are going to be measured, all those things. So we need to pay attention to operationalization. The next stage is research design. Next slide, please. So it's also known as research strategy. Now, Kerlinger uses the term, it's a blueprint for the 3 words. I have put it as 3 bullet points: collection of data, measurement of data, and analysis of data. So we need to be sure of what we intend to, how we intend to collect data, how to measure, how we intend to measure data, and how we intend to analyze the data. So most often in our research objectives, we may be spelling out that we intend to collect data from this. I would suggest let's have a small table called data collection plan. So if you are saying you are talking about multiple respondent categories, it is better to spell out those multiple respondent categories and then spell out how you want to, what sampling you want to collect, you want to adopt, and how you want, what is the count, that means how many respondents you want to tap in each category. That will give us better clarity. So collection of data we need to pay attention to. Similarly, measurement of data will be in terms of the ordinal, the nominal, the interval, and the ratio. So it depends on our operationalization. It depends on the research context. We need to pay attention for all that. Similarly, the data collection plan or the data analysis plan, that will come after the data. But most often it's better to know what we want, know what statistics we ought to apply before we go in for this. The one thing we have to understand is now our plan or the blueprint or research design should be suitable for the research questions. If we want to explore, then most often qualitative approach is the best way out. If we want to analyze, then explanation approach is the best way out. So we have to match our research questions to these research design. That's the message. Then we come to the stage of tool construction. Again, we should not forget previous slide. Again, we should not forget the link between research question, objectives, hypothesis, measurement, testing. If we can note this down and keep it in the back of your mind, most of our research problems are solved. Because when we get thesis for evaluation, we find a disconnect because in the initial pages, the candidate says that they want to do something. But when we go into the data analysis, there is a serious disconnect between what they wanted to do and what they are actually doing. So if we can just maintain bullet points of these are my research objectives, this is how I translated it to objectives, questions into objectives, and then I am devising these hypotheses, and this is the way I'm measuring it, and these are the tests I'm doing it. If we can understand that linkage, half the problem is solved. Now, when we come to tool construction, we have to pay attention to the variables. The tool construction itself is a workshop. Now, we need to understand how many items, what kind of response pattern, how we are going to measure them, and because all these things will have an impact on the statistics that we are going to apply in the next stage. But there are some pointers I just want to tell, especially for the budding researchers. When we are using existing scales, please get permission to use, because increasingly we are talking about copyright, and it's no fun getting into trouble on a later date. So please get permission to use and attribute the source. Similarly, when we are using existing scales, please ensure it is appropriate in our context. That is because that is one easy way to discount our work. When we feel that our tool is not appropriate to our context, then it will be a easy way to say our work is not good enough. So please ensure that let's not just be happy that we got a tool, but let us ensure that it is appropriate in our context. Similarly, we have to pay attention to the reliability, validity in our context also, in the context of a study data. So even if you're using standardized scales which are reliable and valid, please establish the reliability, validity in the light of your data, at least your pilot study data. Now, scale construction is a different chapter and there are different steps and it's a more rigorous process. So there are a lot of papers on that topic. Please follow them. Now, once we finish our tool construction, it's the time to get into the field. That means there is an author who talks about three worlds: theoretical world, empirical world. So now this is the way where real world, theoretical world, empirical world. So now this is the stage where we get into the empirical world. So far we have been doing desk job. That is the theoretical world. Now we need to have a definite data collection plan. And I spoke about it in the context of the research design, identifying who are our respondents, how many samples we intend to collect from each respondent category, what sampling technique we want to do, all those things. So that will ensure that we are doing justice to our objectives and that there is due coverage. Number two, we need to strive for representativeness. That means we should ensure that a sample represents or is a fair representation of the population, because that is one easy way to say that the work is good, not good. When we are not representing the interests of the entire population, our work may not be valuable or valid on that account. So we have to strive for representativeness, and we also need to ensure quantity and quality of data. That means your sample size also matters, the quality of data. That means what? If you are having data that has been arbitrarily filled, people who don't pay attention to it, but we include it in the survey because we need count, then that will contaminate the data. We will not have conclusive findings. Similarly, when we have too many outliers and we are not paying attention to removing them, again, it will contaminate our data. Our findings will not be noteworthy. So we need to pay attention to quality and quantity of data. Similarly, before data analysis, we need to clean the data thoroughly. So that itself is a painstaking job. If we are not fudging data, we are not creating data, we are cleaning data. So we have to be very clear about that. Say, for example, typos, all those things we need to, where we should have entered 2, if we have typed it as 22. So all those things we need to correct it before we go in for analysis. So these are important aspects of the data collection phase. The next is data analysis. When we come to data analysis, can we have the next slide, please? Data analysis. We should apply the right test. Most often, we have the tendency of relying on statisticians. It is good to go to experts, but we should always know that the right tests are there, and we also should know the test. We should not say that it was done by a statistician, so I don't know. So as a researcher, it's still our research, and whatever is in that particular research book or report or paper, we should go by it. So we should apply the right test, and the test will depend on the objective. If you want to describe, we'll be applying descriptive statistics. If you want to explore differences, we would be applying t-test or ANOVA of a parametric. Similarly, if you want to measure relationship, we'll be doing correlation. So each test has a different purpose. So we cannot mix and match or use things arbitrarily. SPSS will give even mean for gender, but that makes no sense. So we have to be very, very cautious and judicious while we apply these tests. The next we have to pay attention is the levels of measurement also impact the statistics that we can adopt. Now, the next slide is, it may seem like Greek and Latin, but when we closely look at it, it talks about the various statistical tests that we have to apply. Say, for example, at the first level, the authors say decide on the type of data. If it is continuous, then follow another track. If it's continuous, you can either have differences or relationships. Similarly, if it's discrete, you can have only chi-square test. So that is the flow chart. So let us all familiarize ourselves with these flow charts so that we know what kind of data, what kind of tests we can apply. Because the statistical test that we can apply depends on the level of data. Similarly, the research objectives. So the next one is regarding research reporting. So we are still mapping the research process and seeing what are the guidelines or do's and don'ts that we can pay attention to so that our work is good enough to be translated into a publication. So in that context, we are speaking. So when it comes to research reporting, we are essentially documenting the research, its process and outcomes. And we need to talk about 3 C's when it comes to research reporting. First one is clarity. That means we should be clear in what we want to communicate. We can't contradict ourselves at different, places in the report. So we need to be very clear. Our thinking can be simple, but very, very clear. It should be very, very clear and straightforward. Similarly, it should be concise. That means brevity, or it's also known as parsimony. That means using just the right amount of words to express oneself, not being verbose, not writing 1,000 words just to express something that can be expressed in 5 words. So conciseness is very, very important. Similarly, coherence. Coherence is the logical flow. What will come after what? So how are you reasoning out things? So when we are writing, we need to pay attention to these 3 aspects, which is clarity, conciseness, and coherence. Now, as researchers, we should know what to report. We also should know what is being reported. Now, when it comes to what to report, we should follow the template, because increasing when we are going, even for thesis, we have templates, we have word counts. But similarly for journal articles also, they will have their own writing styles. They will have word counts. And there are academic writing conventions like the MLA, the APA, whatever. So we need to follow those conventions. We need to pay attention to the in-text citations, references. So all these things we should have, and also the statistical results. We will be having a session on how to report data. So we should know how to report all this. Similarly, we should also know what is reported. That is responsible research. That means when I commit myself to something in my research work, I should go by it, I should know it, and I should vouch for it. So that is the context of research reporting. Next one, please. Now, so far we have seen 2 topics. First one, the concept of scholarly publications. Second, the research process and what we need to adhere to ensure that the various milestones are achieved in a successful way so that the research is good enough for it to be converted into a publication. So that has been the second aspect. Now, moving on to third, giving an overview of journal publication, because we are all required to do that. That's the next slide. Now, when it comes to journal publication, it is very different from thesis reports. Why? Because it is more focused. Now, thesis, we would have spoken about 200 pages. But when you're talking about the journal publications, we are talking about probably 5,000 words, 6,000 words. So it is very different in terms of the focus. Similarly, it is very, very concise, and it's for a very different purpose. When you're talking, so I'm talking about the next slide. So when you're talking about a thesis, you're talking about a degree. But when you're talking about a journal publication, you're talking about scholarly and enlightenment. So there is a purpose is very different. So when we want to write for journal publications, we need to have that thought. That means that inclination to initiate journal publication, because once we finish our thesis and we go through the evaluation process, we are assured of a degree. But to convert our research work into any journal article, we need to have that thought, that spark or inclination. Similarly, I talked about the 3 pillars, which is the knowledge of the subject matter, research methods, and the academic writing norms. Because thesis, the way we wrote it is very different. We need to concise everything and present it in a more focused manner for a journal article. So we need that art of writing as well. Similarly, we also need that discipline and commitment because we have to work in terms of timelines. We need to adhere to the journal requirements. If they give review comments, we have to incorporate that and abide by it and respond to it in a very timely manner. So we need discipline on that account. Similarly, the best thing is to have collaboration. So collaboration is key because we will, there's this proverb which says that when you want to go fast, do it on your own. When you want to go far, do it as a team. So when you research is a journey and it's just not a, it's not a 100-mile, it's not a 100-meter sprint. It's more like a marathon. So for which collaboration is very, very essential. So we should collaborate. It is a process. It will not happen overnight. It is a process. Similarly, we should be open to review. That means review is very, very positive, purposeful critiquing of one's work to enhance its coverage and quality. So we should be open to the concept of review. So these are the essentials of journal, please. Okay, the next is regarding the research to publication. What are the practical insights? First thing, we need to talk about 3 R's, which is read, reflect, review. By read, I'm talking about study. That means study means read as many articles, as many papers as possible, and be conversant with the emerging trends in your field of study. Second, we need to reflect, just not reading. We need to assimilate that, synthesize that, and see what value addition, what originality, what different point of view that I can bring about to the table. So that's reflection. And the third aspect is subjecting ourselves to review either by our own work. That means it's like writing our own draft and then after 2 days looking at the draft and seeing whether it's conclusive, good enough, or where can I edit, where can I enhance it, or having it reviewed by your colleagues, your well-wishers, who can critically evaluate that piece of work. So we should be open to these 3 R's. Similarly, the other practical insights would include first, decide to publish. Most often we are held up. By the time we finish our thesis, we feel that we are worn out, we are tired, we really deserve a break. And then sometimes we tend to forget after that. So we need to make time for publication. We should not leave any thesis untouched just after we get the degree. So please, that's why I'm talking increasingly about thesis, is because that is, as teachers, you will be guiding students, or as students, you'll be doing thesis work. Let's not stop with that. That's ready-made data, that is hard-earned data that you have, that you can convert into a paper. So please, in that context, I'm talking about thesis. So let's decide to publish. We should overcome the writer's block. Now, writer's block is how can I get it done? So they're talking about Scopus index. I don't know anything. Those are attitudes which will happen to anybody, but we need to overcome that. How can we overcome that? We need not start writing 8,000 words at one stretch. Just pen our ideas. Prepare an outline and then elaborate. I think that will be the beginning of more papers to come. Then I would suggest start with small attempts. If we are very new to the field of publication, simple things like even book reviews, writing case studies, or writing working papers, all those things are humble beginnings, but it will go a long way. When we write a book review, we know how to, weigh the strength and the weakness of a particular work, and then present it in a very concise manner. Similarly, when we write a case study, we are able to put our thoughts into a very in a nutshell. So these are small attempts which will be appreciated and which will be a boost to us. So we need to focus on that. But we should not always say, okay, I'm happy with book review, let me stop there. But we should follow with incremental improvements. So last time I did at this level, so this time I'll try one more step ahead. I will stretch myself, I'll push myself and achieve something more. So that should be the approach. We should be following it up with incremental improvements. Similarly, when we are having thesis work, we need not compress all that data into one journal publication. It's our innovation, our creativity, how we are able to package that data. So we should decide what aspect of our research work we wish to publish. Similarly, this will apply even to a project. When we have done any funded projects or our own research, it is up to us whether we want to present everything in one go or try to point out at different points of view. Then, as I mentioned earlier, it's good to always have an outline or a sketch, just the keywords, and then elaborate. And collaboration is very key for good research work, especially in the long run, because when you collaborate, we have multiple minds at work, and when there is teamwork, it's good. But it's a journey. It doesn't happen overnight, because you have to find people who are of your wavelength, people who are interested in your field of research, people, each one will approach the same research problem from a different point of view. So we need to find common ground. So all those things are very important. Then we need, and as we are having research scholars also here, when we publish papers, we should spell out the co-authors correctly, the protocol to include research guide, or all other people who have contributed to the study. We should follow it in the right approach. So please pay attention, otherwise it creates. The next thing would be to know the journals in your field. There are very scientific approaches. People, the thing like Journal Finder, it is there. But the simple way is, where did you draw your literature? That is the shortcut that I could tell. Where did you draw the literature? Which journal was most handy to you? Which standard journal was most handy, useful to you? I think that should be a good benchmark for you to take it forward. Similarly, we should identify the right journal in which we want to have it published, because we have a wide variety of journals, each having different scope of or different perspectives. So we need to finalize which is the right journal for us. So there is something called a Journal Finder, so you could explore that. And I'm sure in the subsequent sessions, it will be handled as well. Now, then an easy way out is identifying article templates. Now, say for example, if you have prepared a scale, if you have constructed a scale, identify articles that have reported scale construction in the recent past and try to follow that sketch. I'm only suggesting, I'm not compelling. It's just a way out. When we follow that sketch, we know that that particular article has been published in a good journal. And when we know that we have adhered to all that has been reported in that article, we know that we are in a good stand. The chances of our paper being accepted is high or is better. So that is the context in which I am talking about identify article templates to guide you. Similarly, if we are attempting an article on systematic review, systematic review is an in thing now. So, or you want to do meta-analysis. If you want to do it, take some templates. That means articles on systematic reviews or articles that are meta-analysis, which in a different field, and see how they have handled it. See, ensure that you adhere what is that. So that should be the minimum. Try to excel that. I think that will increase our chances of getting published. Then once we identify the right journal, we need to adhere to the journal guidelines. Say for example, they will say, I want American Management Association style of writing. But if we end up doing APA, there may be subtle differences which may really tick them off. So it's important that we adhere to journal guidelines. Then there are a lot of e-learning resources available, especially academic institutions on their website. Similarly, journals on their websites in terms of author resources or writing resources. So please, let's have it as a habit to browse through these pages, learn from it. There are so many concept papers, there are so many templates available, and that's a wealth of information, ready resource. We need not feel that we are not able to go to our library or we don't have enough collection in our library. I mean, we need not feel bad. These are all free resources available to anybody. All it takes is that we have to browse and get it done. The next thing would be to attend scholarly conferences. Not every other conference is scholarly. By scholarly, I mean people pay attention to the paper presentation. There is a more focus on question and answer, and the focus is on paper development, content development. So such papers, when we such conferences, when we attend, there is better clarity or value addition. Similarly, there are specialized workshops which help us to improve our skill on publication presentation. So those things will be useful. And then this particular workshop is also one example. So probably this is a beginning for many. So that way, when we participate in such programs, we know what is what. We get to network with people. We get to collaborate. We get to find common ground. Probably there is an important, emerging paper that has come up that you are not aware of. So many things, so many benefits. So we need to attend these things on a regular basis. And we also need to keep track of special call for papers. Now, when we, especially now the most journals would have had a lot of special call for papers, especially in the context of COVID. So please read through the call for papers and find that itself will give us some ideas to talk about, because we now know what will be the thrust area, and accordingly we can plan our research work. That way we'll choose the right research problem. Our problem identification will be more pertinent. So many benefits. Keep track of special call for papers. And now when we prepare our drafts, we should always give our best, and we should never be in a haste to submit any raw manuscripts, because imagine our students submitting very, very shabby work. It will really, it will really put us off, because it's a demand on our time. Similarly, it is so for the journals, it is so for the reviewers, for the editors. So we have, when we are, when we are anticipating good publications, we should focus, we should always strive to give our best. Then we should always have the manuscript reviewed before we submit it. That means a first level of review will be our own self. That means we write it out, wait for a day or two, then when things have settled, have a fresh look at that piece of work. Then if it's okay, then take it forward to the next level. Have it peer reviewed based on your own links. That means your own guide, the first level. Similarly, collaborators, that means your other friends who are other peers who are in that field, for them to have a look at it. It's a mutual exercise. They help you out for this, your paper, you help them out for the other paper. So we need to have that manuscript reviewed by ourselves before we submit it. That's very vital. Similarly, we also need to proofread our work. Otherwise, small spelling errors will really, we all know that English is not our mother tongue, but when we are applying for, when we are submitting work in journals for which the medium is English, we should measure up to those standards. Then we also need to pay attention to attributions. That means in-text citations. Knowingly or unknowingly, we should not plagiarize. So we have to be very, very careful about that. And I have already talked about copyrighted material, because now increasingly with technology it's much easier to track the violations. So we have to be very careful when we are using copyrighted material. So it's important mainly to ask for permission when we are using standardized scales and all those things. Then when we are communicating with journals, the protocol is very, very important in terms of how to address them, writing the cover letter, enclosing the required documents, following it up, responding on time. All these things will be spelled out in tomorrow's session. Then once we submit an article, if whatever feedback we get, we should take it in the right spirit. It can be rejection, complete rejection, or it can be articles with minor revision, major revision, or acceptance. Whatever the review, we should be happy to take it in the right spirit. And any rejection doesn't mean that our work is not worthy. It only means we are not measuring up to their standard. Probably we are not in the right venue. So we have to take course correction. But when there are review comments which says that, okay, if you can carry out these changes and resubmit, we'll be happy to consider. Let us not lose steam. Let us not be dejected. Again, let us put our full effort and get it done. And when it comes to publications or even literature review, we should avoid predatory journals. And at any cost, we should not compromise on academic integrity. That is very important. Okay, now that is the third phase of my presentation. I said my presentation is structured into four. First one, what we mean by scholarly publication. Second, what are the do's and don'ts, or what are the precautions we can take to ensure that the research is good. And third, what are the practical insights when it comes to journal publications. Now the final thing is on my review experiences. As a reviewer, what have I experienced? Now, that it's very we are all in this as researchers wanting to have publications. It's like we are all eager to get a job. That means we are the candidate. Now, as academicians, now admission time, we are on the other side of the table. We know what kind of questions we are going to ask. So when we know what are the expectations of the other party, it is much easier to respond to it and fulfill the gaps. So in that context, I'm just sharing my review experiences. These are not complete because, again, these are my experiences. First thing is vague review of literatures. Most often I've seen articles, we have voluminous pages of material, but it's just a mere compilation. There is no synthesis, there is no value addition. So we have to pay attention to literature review. Similarly, there's poor logical reasoning. That argumentation is not very correct. Very, very weak links. So we have to be very careful about that. When you say A is related to B, we should have strong reasoning why A is related to B. The strong reasoning will be got through literature support. So that literature support is not there. Similarly, there is no depth in arguments. That's an extension of the previous point. Then sweeping statements, just generalizing, all are like this. In India, it's always like this. I mean, that's not the way to do. Even if it's a claim, even if it's a statement, it has to be supported by literature. So we should be very, very clear about that. Then improper structuring of text. That means there's no coherence. It's all jumbled. Suddenly we are talking about concept A, and then in another context, out of the blue, again we are talking about context A. So we need to structure that logical flow we have to pay attention to. Then poor operationalization. That means it doesn't, you're not spelling out how we are going to measure your variables. That is poor operationalization. Then there is a disconnect between your conceptualization and operationalization. That means you say, okay, this is my conceptual definition. That means you are going by a particular school of thought. But when you operationalize, when you don't confine to that school of thought, there is a disconnect. That is very, very dangerous because you have so long you have put the foundation saying, I'm going to look at things from this point of view, and suddenly you make a U-turn and look from another point of view. That's disastrous. Similarly, application of wrong statistical tests. That is also a serious matter. When we have to apply parametric, we have to apply parametric tests. When you're talking about differences, we should use the appropriate tests. Especially now that we have statistical packages, whatever we input will get an output. So we should know that we are clicking the right buttons, we are using the right tests. So that is a caution. Then the problem statement and discussion section is purely original information from the researcher. That means what you intend to study, your importance of the study, then the discussion in the light of your data findings. All those things, if we cannot substantiate, that is an issue. So sometimes we find that to be extremely sketchy. So we have to be very careful about that. One easy way out, or one thing that really bugs reviewers would be the missing references. We check the in-text citations, we map it with the references. If there is a disconnect, then that's an issue. So what you claim to be part of your writing should be projected. Your in-text citation should be in the reference. Your reference should pertain to the in-text citations. There should be a perfect match. And then finally, we will be talking about copy-paste errors. So if we have revised certain things, it can be a spelling, it can be the terminology, probably we have expanded terms. So those copy-paste errors, spelling errors, those we have to pay attention to. The last one is non-adherence to journal norms. So that is the easiest way for desk rejection. So when we want to, it's like applying for a job. When we apply for a job, though it is the same person, but based on the employer, we are required to customize our CV. Similarly, though it is the same data, when you are attempting each journal, it's important that we customize even the cover letter, the journal, article, or the manuscript in that pattern. So that if we don't adhere to it, that's one straight reason for things to be rejected. So these are my review experiences, and I'm to the end of my presentation. I'm open.